and welcome to Cult Movie Cult, where we watch and discuss the horrific, the obscure, and the flat-out strange from the other side of cinema. I'm Mark Dickerson.
And I'm Jeremy Fink, and this is the third episode in our series Flash in the Can, the one-hit wonders of cult cinema. Today we'll be discussing 1985's Return to Oz, directed by Walter Murch.
Elena! This is our old house. The one the tornado blew away. This is how I got to Oz the first time.
Looks like it was a rough trip.
This used to be my bedroom. And in there was the kitchen. That's where we landed on the Wicked Witch of the East.
Wicked Witch?
But where are all the munchkins?
What are you on about, my dear?
Oh, no.
Return to Oz is a 1985 fantasy film directed and written by Walter Murch. It follows the story of Dorothy Gale, previously from The Wizard of Oz, also featured in Frank L. Baum's Oz series, as she looks to return to Oz after a brief hiatus at home. We pick her up after the big storm that's destroyed her home, and she's having some kind of strange delusions of Oz, or at least her Auntie M sees it that way. And so they look to send her to an institution where she can be cured of her delusions and her visions of this strange land that she keeps talking about, where she's given electric shock treatment. She escapes in a rainstorm, floats over to Oz, and then has to kind of find her way through Oz and the strange land it's become in the time since she's been there last. It's been decimated. It's this decrepit, kind of no longer nice, beautiful place. No. And she looks to return it to its former glory with her new companions TikTok, Jack Pumpkinhead, and the Gump. Yes, the Gump. A couch, a couch with a moose head. The Gump.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
A
little bit of a tricky synopsis there to get through, because it's a little bit of a tricky plot for this film. It's kind of out there.
Well, it starts off very dark.
Yeah.
So it stays pretty dark the entire time. But before we get into the film, Jeremy, I just want to mention, I think it's safe to say that we won't be talking about very many Disney films on this podcast. But this is a Disney film. And I don't think we ever talked about anything produced by Disney at this point. Mostly because, mostly because most of what they make is pretty mainstream and does very well. Not many cult films in their repertoire. So this is a bit of an anomaly. And it's an anomaly for a lot of reasons, which we'll go into during this episode. But one of the reasons is, so this is a sequel to, obviously, The Wizard of Oz. And this came out 46 years after that film was released. And also another anomaly here is that Walter Murch, who is known as a legend in the film business, he's actually known for his sound mixing and his editing. He directed this film, and because this is the series where we're talking about one-hit wonders, so this is the only film to date that he has directed. And while he has done a lot in the film world and he's very revered, this was not seen as a success when it came out. It was very much not successful. So
yeah, it kind of fills an interesting place in kind of the grand scheme of cinema as a whole, and also in the career of Walter Murch. As we just mentioned, he was really known for his sound mixing and his editing. He has credits that include sound mixing. He sound mixed The Godfather. He sound mixed American Graffiti. He edited and did sound on The Conversation. And what he's most known for is his editing of Apocalypse Now. So he's really kind of renowned,
he's the guy,
tour-driven, big, important movies he's known for. Yeah. So this was kind of a strange way. I actually, this is the first time I've seen this movie. This was Mark's recommendation. And when he said that Walter Murch had directed it, I was really pretty surprised to learn that. I had never even really heard of this film. I guess it kind of flew under the radar for me.
Yeah.
But it has a kind of interesting backstory that I was finding, because I guess Walter Murch was talking with an executive at Disney, and they were asking him what he wanted to do to see if they could kind of find common ground for him to work on a project. and he said that he wanted to do something that would take them back to the universe of Oz. And Disney, so now it's easy to think, oh, Disney has always been this behemoth superpower who's just always successful. But the 80s were not a good time for Disney. They didn't really have a lot of major hits financially. The studio was really struggling, and they owned the rights to the Oz movies.
And this would seem like a home run. This would seem like a surefire hit, right? On paper, at least. Yeah.
It's a very safe bet for them. So, they kind of were looking to do something with this property because basically they had about 5 years until their rights to the story ran out. So they were looking to get something produced because it was this great intellectual property that they didn't want to pass up. And here comes this guy who had a great reputation in Hollywood for producing really high quality material, saying he wanted to do it. So it was kind of this match made in heaven. But it didn't go exactly as I think Disney would have wanted it to go.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the film is just very strange. It's very, the way it came out is, intentionally or not, it's very like surreal. And actually, you had mentioned that I recommended this movie and I had seen it before, which I had, but it's one of those movies that really, it almost feels like a dream. Like you dreamed it, you know what I mean? Because even though I saw it, rewatching it, I'm like, wow, this, like, even now as I'm rewatching, I'm like, this feels like very surreal and strange.
Yeah.
So, and also I think part of that is because it's a sequel, but it's also sort of a reimagining. So there's a much younger actress playing Dorothy this time around than Judy Garland.
How did you feel about that, Mark? How did you feel about the younger actress playing Dorothy?
I think a big part of what Walter Murch was trying to do with this film is to emulate more of the books, like to go back to the original novels that came out, the children's stories that were made by L. Frank Baum. I think he wanted to go back to that source material and try to use that as much as he could. And in those stories, Dorothy is, I believe, 11 years old. So she's
a kid.
Yeah, she's a kid. And so this is more, I would say this better reflects the protagonist from the original story. So in that regard, I think it makes sense. It is strange because it's also, like we said, it's also a sequel to The Wizard of Oz. So it's like, okay, but now this character looks younger. And, and the characters that we do see who come back, very brief cameos like the Scarecrow and Tin Man and Cowardly Lion, they look very different, extremely different actually, and are totally different personalities. So yeah, it has that kind of dreamlike, surreal kind of feel to it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the way you described it is right on the money. It isn't like just watching a movie about a dream. It's kind of like digging into one yourself, where it really takes you to this strange place, kind of in a similar way, but also a different way to how the original Wizard of Oz. I think the original Wizard of Oz took you to this kind of
more whimsical, I guess.
Yeah, a whimsical kind of sweet dreamland, like the kind of place where you would want to hang out. Even the scary elements.
Yeah.
Like the witch and the flying monkeys always scared the hell out of me.
They're still scary, yeah.
They're still scary. But for the most part, even the kind of scarier elements about the original Wizard of Oz film are still fun to exist in.
Yeah, there's like the Technicolor aspect and the everything looks like candy and yeah.
Yeah, the scary elements of this film, this feels more like a nightmare than a sweet dream. Like even like the yellow brick road is torn apart. Everything kind of looks like it's just been demolished. It's not a sweet place to go. But this was meant to be a kids movie. Right. I can't name too many other children's movies that have electroshock treatment as a major plot point.
Yeah.
So they really took some risks, and this may have been why Disney maybe struggled a little bit in the 80s. Is they were kind of trying to find who their audience was, because maybe some of the kids who they had previously been able to cater to were growing up a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were maybe trying to find a way to kind of balance, not making it for too little kids, but not making it straight up for adults either.
But that's the aspect I feel like you can look back at it now and kind of respect that, because I respect the fact that when it came out, I'm sure people were perplexed at the time. I'm sure it didn't really make much sense, but like looking back at it now, and now that it's become more of a cult film, I can respect the fact that they didn't really cash in too much on the nostalgia, like as much as they could have, right? Because like we talked about, the ruby slippers are there, Toto makes an appearance, there is the yellow brick road, although, and the Emerald City actually, they do reappear, but they are, disfigured and broken, like you said. The citizens all turned to stone. So the elements are there, but they're so different, like so boldly different, that it almost seems like they did that intentionally. Like, they definitely they went a different route, a somewhat darker route, which we'll get into, I'm sure, more. But and I'm sure that's a big part, that the mainstream audience at the time rejected the film. I think they wanted probably more of the same. They wanted what they remembered, from their youth.
Well, I think context is important too, because this movie, it came out in 1985, and this was peak Reagan America.
Oh yeah.
This was peak Reagan 80s, and
which we'll get back to with American Psycho, by the way.
Which we will get back to later on in this series with American Psycho. But I think there was a thing where people kind of during that era, a lot of the movies that were very successful had this kind of they needed to have a sweet kind of feeling to them by the end, and this movie, once again, as we say on pretty much episodes, spoilers ahead. Watch the movie first.
Yes,
if you will. But always. Even though this one kind of has a sweet ending, to me it didn't really feel sweet because this girl is still going to live again with her aunt and her uncle, I believe, who just sent her to get electroshock therapy.
And the only reason they didn't go through with it is because it burned down or something like that.
Yeah, and that was also something. This is a little bit of a jumping around thing, but at the very end of the film. Once again, spoilers. At the very end of the film, the center where she was getting her electroshock therapy, someone made a quick comment that it burned down because it was struck by lightning.
Yeah.
And that the man who was in charge of the electroshock machine died in the fire. Like they just casually, they're like, yeah, he didn't make it out of the he didn't make it out of the fire. He went back in to get his machines, and then this other woman who was just doing her job was arrested. For some reason, probably because Dorothy
she's evil. Yeah.
Got away because the light. Yeah, just because she was evil. But like these were two people who, it wasn't the best medical practices. We know that now. Yeah. But at the time, they were just medical professionals trying to innovate and do their job in the field of mental health. And they killed one of them and let the other one go. It was a little bit of a it was not a happy ending for everyone, or really anyone for that matter.
I guess
because Dorothy still, we don't really know if this actually happened or not. Dorothy might just be having hallucinations as a 10-year-old girl. She has a new house that's built, but they still live in a place where probably another tornado is going to come any day now. It's really not a happy, sweet...
more of a, like a somber ending, sort of.
Yeah. The whole thing is a little more somber.
In keeping with that, that tone of the film. It's definitely darker. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's a term that gets thrown around a lot now. Like, like films with darker, gritty. Those words are thrown around a lot. But I feel like this film is just is that way. I feel like it's not even trying to be that way. It's just the way it comes off. Is we'll get into some of the specific images that still creep me out to this day. But there's lots of stuff like that. So, so as you mentioned, there's the they brought more real-world elements into the film, I noticed, than the first one because, as you mentioned, it starts off with that very controversial treatment, in quotes, of electric shock therapy, which is super controversial, and there's a lot of history behind that. And to put that in this children's film, to have the main character going through that, seems like a very deliberate choice. Seems like Walter Murch knew what he was doing with that. Because it's almost like he was trying to tie it to a time in history. A time that whereas people look at the first film, the first Wizard of Oz that came out, what was that, 1939, I believe. And it's like they look back at it with a very saccharine and just like a an image of it that's just like bright and happy, but things like this were going on at that time, and it's like, and it's like he, Walter Murch was seemed like he wanted to bring more of that real world element into the film.
Yeah, well, and this is also, a lot of the work Walter Murch did was very kind of driven. If you look at a lot of the movies and when he was kind of at his peak creativity and peak working with these big directors, a lot of it was kind of political. Apocalypse Now is a Vietnam film. You know what I mean? There was this certain element of politics and cultural critique that went on in the work, and I think that he kind of was looking to find a way to slip it into this film a little bit. Which I don't know. It's really interesting. It's so bizarre now, just thinking about how that script kind of got through all of the channels that it got through to be a Disney movie.
Right.
I have a hard time now. I mean, now everything is a little more dark and edgy.
And Disney owns everything now, so.
But yeah, and Disney owns everything. But even so, like a Disney movie that's intended for kids, perfect example would be like Inside Out or something like that. Like it's dealing with some kind of dark, heavy subject matter, but they do it in a way where like it's not so explicitly shown. Someone might be going through something and kind of using their imagination to process and cope, but it's not going to be done in a way that makes you feel kind of horrified. Like it's not going to make you really face the realities of electroshock therapy. They'll do it in a way where it kind of makes you understand that maybe that's what they're getting at, but it's more about implication. But this was like you saw the machine. Yeah. And it was the machine had a face on it, which made it that was way scarier. It was supposed to be, I think, make it like a little sweeter and cuter, but well, to me, like it...
Yeah. Well, it's, I guess, a callback to the original film, right? Because, so, like you mentioned, the electric shock machine in the film, or in the real world of the film, resembles the character that we go on to meet in the film TikTok, right? So he looks like a robot. And that's similar to the farmhands reappearing as different characters in the first film. And how there's like different elements from Dorothy's life that kind of come back. So I thought that was actually kind of clever and kind of cool.
But also really disturbing.
Oh, yes, definitely.
This girl is, you know, what's the word? Anthropomorphizing a electroshock therapy machine to be her friend.
Exactly.
Like that's one of the most disturbing things I've maybe ever seen in a movie.
This movie is quite disturbing. It really is.
It's quite disturbing.
It's really...
Which is why it's kind of a good cult movie, because now as an adult, we can watch it.
It's it's great for Halloween time, too.
Yeah, great for Halloween. Not necessarily, but there's a character with a head, as a pumpkin as a head.
Speaking of heads...
Jack Pumpkinhead.
Well, speaking of heads, I was going to bring up... One of the things that endlessly creeps me out is when they show the hallway with the living heads in the glass display cases. I mean, that's just like they're just like blinking at you, and it's just creepy. Like it's just so creepy. And that, and like the obviously Beware the Wheelers, like those Wheeler characters. Yeah. That's like the thing that if you type in like Return to Oz creepy on YouTube or something, that's what's gonna pop up, I'm sure. Yeah. You know, because I think it's the image that a lot of people who watch this film in their youth, they just remember that, for better or worse. It's because they just come off as so creepy and like threatening and strange.
Which is kind of funny to me, because they're not really good
They're also
villains.
Corny. Yeah, they're also strange. Like,
but also like, what are they gonna do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
they have no opposable thumbs. And...
They get very upset when you steal their lunchboxes, though, apparently.
Yeah. Like, I guess they could maybe run you over or, like, knock you down. But, like, past that, there's not really... I don't think they can grab you, you know?
No, I don't think so. It's more just the image of them is just very...
but they are disturbing.
Unsettling. Which is kind of like like you mentioned, the monkeys, the flying monkeys from the original movie. Yeah. And there are lots of things that, like, you know, even though this is... obviously, it's trying to distance itself from that first movie in a lot of ways, and it be more like the books. There are lots of callbacks, and there are lots of similarities and parallels between the two films. Like I just mentioned, the lunchboxes off the tree. Like in the first film, Dorothy takes an apple off a tree, and the tree attacks her. In this one, you know, she takes a lunchbox off a tree, and that comes back to be not such a good thing as well. So there's things like that that kind of pop up, and the big thing is obviously the ruby slippers, and that's a very specific reference to the classic 1939 film, because in the books it was actually, I believe, silver shoes. They were not silver shoes. Yeah, they were not ruby slippers. So that's something that I guess they really wanted to maintain. I'm not sure if that was Walter Murch's idea or Disney's idea. I'm guessing probably Disney. But maybe both. Maybe they just wanted to incorporate that, because that's the most iconic probably image from the first movie, is those ruby
I would
sisters.
actually be curious, though, if it was Walter Murch or Disney, because apparently that was the one thing that MGM did own the rights to. Disney did not own the rights to the ruby slippers.
Right. Right.
Because that was an addition just for the movie. That wasn't because Disney had the rights to use the books. They did not have the rights to use things that were made up just for the movie, which is probably why the characters look different.
Yeah.
And all that.
That's a very good point, actually.
Why Oz looks different, why a bunch of things in the film look different. It's probably a rights issue, but apparently they paid a lot of money. I don't have an exact number, but they paid a lot of money to be able to use the ruby slippers. So I don't know, but it is an interesting thing. But I think, and Mark, you were saying this before, I think they kind of had to, because we had all culturally just attached this idea of these ruby slippers to the Wizard of Oz in so closely that for them to not use the ruby slippers, but to kind of proclaim this as a sequel to the Wizard of Oz, which I don't know. I'm looking at the poster right now, I'm not seeing anything that says it's actually a sequel to the Wizard of Oz. It's, obviously it's Return to Oz, and their tagline is, it's an all new live action fantasy filled with Disney adventure and magic.
Yeah.
So they say nothing about it being attached to the Wizard of Oz.
So that really was the ruby slippers were like the only element that really was it directly from that film, I guess. Yeah,
which is kind of an interesting thing. And once again, this is why I say I'm not sure Disney totally knew on this one what their goals were, in terms of where they were positioning this, because I think they could have just marketed it totally as its own thing, and it may have actually done better. But because they kind of made it seem like it was maybe something that was attached to the original film.
They wanted to bank on that nostalgia a little bit.
They wanted to bank on it, but they didn't make something that felt anything like the original film.
Exactly, and I think that's where the disparity comes from. It's like, it's supposed to feel this way, but really it feels like this. So
because this on its own, is it's a very specific, way different thing. And I think if you just to say, all right, we're coming out with a movie that has nothing to do with the Wizard of Oz, it's about the books. It's a literary adaptation.
Yeah.
And it's close to the books. I think people might have had an easier time kind of accepting it.
That's true. That is true. And if you look at the illustrations from the original books, which I love, by the way, and I did read the first 3 actually.
Oh, you did?
Just because they're so short, and I just was curious because I always, the first movie. As I was telling Jeremy before we recorded, it's my mom's favorite movie, and we watch it all the time, like every year, like we'll always watch that movie. So The Wizard of Oz looms very large in my life. So I figured I'd go back, and now that I have a daughter and stuff, I've been more curious about children's books and stuff. So I went back.
Has she seen it yet, or is it a little too scary for her?
I feel like we're kind of on the verge. The monkeys might freak her out, but yeah, I think soon I'm going to try to show it to her.
Very exciting.
Which would be cool. So this film is, while it's such a classic, I think it's kind of cool that maybe because of necessity, I guess they actually went more toward the original books and the original illustrations, and because I do like the illustrations from the original books, and they actually went the way they portray the characters, like you don't see the Tin Man or the Lion very long, or but when you do see them, they actually resemble the illustrations from the original books, and those were done by William Wallace Denslow. And when you get a chance, look him up and his history with the author L. Frank Baum of the original book, because it's extremely interesting. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole with it on Wikipedia, and I just want to mention that at one point, so they have a bit of a feud, not to get too into it, but just they have a bit of a feud, the two of them, about who owns the rights to the actual characters in Oz, and they both have competing newspaper comic strips at one point, and also at one point, Denslow, the illustrator, has his own island and declares himself the ruler of the island. And this is a real person that actually existed. So yeah, when you get a chance, if you're interested, look that up. But back to Return to Oz, which is in its own way quite odd and surreal. So I mean, Jeremy, what are your kind of what are your thoughts? I mean, since you haven't ever grown up with it, or you had never seen it before, what's your main takeaway from this film?
So a few takeaways actually. That I thought were interesting. One, obviously, like we said, pretty wild, dark, spooky thing, not what I was expecting at all. So that was just kind of exciting because I've never really seen such a dark take on the Wizard of Oz. Not on the Wizard of Oz, but on the Oz folklore. To be totally honest, I don't know too much about it. I love the original movie, but past that, I don't know too much. So this was kind of interesting. 2, this movie had a really great cast. Yeah. Like a particularly interesting cast. So the one who played Auntie M, Piper Laurie, was the mother in Carrie. She gave an intense performance in that, and then was later featured in Twin Peaks, the series. Yeah. Which I thought was a kind of interesting thing, especially because David Lynch is a noted Wizard of Oz freak. He loves the Wizard of Oz. Right. So in a weird way, this movie maybe kind of influenced Twin Peaks. Which is kind of interesting. The other thing that called to mind, as we're doing this One Hit Wonder series, for me, what I find so interesting about One Hit Wonders is kind of the influence they had because generally, at least for me creatively, I'll get really into a particular artist and that artist will start to influence me. But every once in a while, there'll be a standalone movie or a standalone song or a piece of painting or something. So, someone who doesn't have this prolific career, but they make something that really kind of gets in my head. And I was thinking about what movies this movie might have influenced. And the one that kept coming to mind, which is actually, it's not a one-hit wonder because he's made so many other films. But I kept thinking of the movie Sucker Punch.
Okay.
Directed by, I believe, Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Have you seen Sucker Punch?
I've seen like parts of it. I haven't seen the whole thing though.
So Sucker Punch follows, it's the story of a young woman who goes to a mental institution, and to deal with the treatments that she was dealing with, which included a looming lobotomy, she kind of imagined this world where she was dancing and fighting off scary monsters.
Wow, it's very similar, actually.
Which is very similar. And I was thinking about it, and it's kind of that movie's kind of done a similar thing in terms of its following too, where when it came out, it wasn't really that well liked. And because people, I think, just didn't really get the tone. But in recent years, at least personally, a lot of people I've talked to who really love kind of dark and weird movies have expressed their love to me for the movie Sucker Punch.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think there are some interesting kind of parallels there. So I don't know if that's really a takeaway or just kind of something I connected with. But I always think it's interesting just seeing these this kind of family tree of these kind of cult and obscure movies of how they branch out. What about you, Mark? What kind of takeaways or ideas did you pull from this?
Really, just what I said earlier about it feeling like a dream, and I think that's what I like about it. It's also probably the main fault of the film is that it's maybe besides it being unsettling or disturbing, which for that depends on who you are about whether you're into that aspect of it or not. I just feel like it's maybe a little muddled because it is based on essentially not one book but two. So So it was the direct sequel to Wizard of Oz, or The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the book. When it came out, it was followed by two books by L. Frank Baum called The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. So two completely different books, and he took those and kind of, I guess, mashed them together. And I mean, he does it in a good way, I think. Like, I think he did some actually pretty clever stuff with it. But because he kind of takes those two different stories and puts them together, I think it in turn kind of makes the movie feel a little muddied and kind of all over the place, maybe not in the best way. But other than that, I feel like I'm a sucker for practical effects and animatronics and stuff like that. So, and I think they even used some claymation in there. So I think
they used a lot of claymation in here.
The Gnome King, I believe, was a lot of that was stop animation. So I'm a sucker for those kind of effects, and this movie has tons of it. Even the big prosthetic pumpkin head on Jack Pumpkinhead, I love that stuff. Like, I just, that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. So
talking chicken,
Belina, I mean, and TikTok himself is really cool, and apparently, to get him to walk, I think there was like a circus performer or something, or a gymnast or someone like that inside the costume, actually on his hands, walking on his hands to get that right.
Oh, wow.
So, stuff like that, which you just don't see anymore in movies, I just kind of love. And so from that aspect, I really think it's cool. And also, I have a theory where a lot of the reason that people are, get creeped out by older movies and maybe older children's films or things like that, I think it's because they didn't use computer imagery as much. And I think a lot of it it has that textural, like it has that, it feels real. It looks more real in certain ways, and I think it kind of gets in your head and can kind of mess with you in that way, which I think is kind of cool. Like, I think that it's cool that they actually made a TikTok and they made a Jack Pumpkinhead, and and they may not look perfect and they may look a little eerie, but I think it's cool they made them, and I think that's part of why these images stick on our heads. But I don't know. Do you feel the same way, or?
Yeah, I mean, I love practical effects. Yeah. I think it's just so fun. I mean, there's a place. I'm not one of those people who's just so anti CGI and computer driven effects.
If it's used sparingly enough, I think
if
fine,
it's used sparingly or in the right situation, it can be very good.
Right.
But there's something about practical effects where there's just a certain level of creativity that has to go into figuring it out, that I think you end up with these really interesting solutions that sometimes look great, sometimes don't look as great, but they always kind of have a unique feeling to them because each specific problem requires a specific solution. There's not kind of a blanket solution to figuring out. Because you say, all right, we want a character who has a neck as thin as a Coke can, but we want him to have a head the size of 3 basketballs.
Right.
That's a pumpkin, and we want him to talk and move. Like, that's a really specific, complicated problem to figure out, and the solution you're going to get to that, trying to actually make it happen, is going to be more surprising and more interesting than going on a computer and doing it.
Right, the practicality of it. And in that instance with Jack Pumpkinhead, they actually couldn't find a solution. They couldn't make his mouth move, so his mouth does not move in the movie, which is, that's fine. Like, you watch it and you're not like disappointed that his mouth doesn't move. Like, it's, it works. It all kind of works. So I think from that aspect, I do kind of I definitely respect the film and what they were trying to do, and the fact that I guess, like you brought up, maybe they couldn't really bank on the nostalgia as much as they wanted to. Maybe they did want to do that more, but because they didn't own the rights, maybe they couldn't. So maybe I'm giving them like more credit than I should. But I think it's kind of cool that it is so different. Because let's face it, if you're gonna try to remake The Wizard of Oz, you're gonna fail. Like, it's just there's no way. That's like we were just talking about before we started today. Like, it's one of those or maybe the one movie besides like maybe the original Star Wars, that Hollywood just won't touch again. Like
Star Wars, the original Godfather, they won't remake.
As far as like rebooting or remaking, like, they'll obviously use the intellectual property again, and the name of it. But they're as far as actually remaking the film, I mean, some films are just completely timeless and classic, and it's almost impossible to do that. And the original Wizard of Oz is one of those movies. So to me, this movie kind of makes sense. I mean, what else could you have done, really? Yeah.
An interesting note too, in terms of, because I think one of the things we've kind of hit on a few times in this conversation is that this movie didn't totally land, and it's kind of tough to figure out why. I mean, it's not tough to figure out why, having seen the movie, because it's not really a children's movie,
right?
But not really an adult movie either, which now would do better, but back then not as much. But a couple of things in the production that happened, because this is our one-hit wonder series, so to circle it back to Walter Murch a little bit.
Right.
So he actually, during the course of filming, he was fired briefly. And Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas actually petitioned for him to be rehired. And then, I don't remember if it's before or after, but the head of Disney actually either resigned or was fired during that time too. So there was a change of management there. And when the next studio head came in, they actually gave this movie more money to make. So there are also just a lot of elements going on kind of behind the scenes that could also influence how a movie ends up tonally landing. Particularly the studio, because, a director being fired and then coming back, he still kind of has the same ideas. But a studio head switch, I'm sure you have one person who's giving the whole production one kind of notes, and then all of a sudden, halfway through, you have another person giving them notes that inevitably are saying the exact opposite thing.
It's interesting you said they gave them more money?
I believe they gave them more money, because what happens a lot of the time, in my understanding, is whenever there's a switch, like a big regime change at a studio, a lot of projects end up getting dropped. A lot of projects end up getting trashed, which means that there's A, money kind of going down the drain, but B, they don't have as many projects in development or not in development, they don't have as many projects in production, rather, for a little bit, which means that the ones that they are releasing, they probably really need to make sure are doing well.
Right.
And a lot of the time, a way in the film industry, at least in theory, to make sure your project does well is to throw a little bit more money at it. So my guess, I don't know, I wasn't there, and I don't know anyone who was directly involved with it to talk to, but my guess would be that they looked at this film as good intellectual property and said, all right, we don't have these other movies coming out because we just put the kibosh on them because there's regime change, but this one is a pretty sure shot because it's attached to The Wizard of Oz, so let's throw a little bit more resource-wise at this and see if we can make it really take off. Unfortunately for Disney, that was not the case.
That's very interesting, Jeremy, because I read that the new executives that came in didn't have faith in the movie at all, and they gave it a limited promotion and a short theatrical run, so I thought that was part of the reason that it didn't do so well. So
I don't know, and once again, this information, these are things that are kind of
well, yeah. When it comes to the
you
internet,
get a lot of different stories from
Right.
different people who were involved with it.
Yeah,
I
can see it going either way.
it could, and it could have been both. It could have been a thing where
Right.
they threw more money at it and then realized they didn't like the product and then cut it off. I don't know. These things get buried a lot, which is why it's complicated.
Yeah.
Movie financing, particularly at the studio level, is kind of a murky thing. People kind of have a habit of hiding money, particularly in their advertising budgets. They have a habit of hiding money, and the big reason for that, as I understand it, is that you don't want to actually show profit, because the minute you show profit, you have to start paying royalties to your talent and to your director and your creative people. But if you're showing that you're still in the red, then the only people collecting are the people who have put money into it.
Okay.
So I don't know. There's a lot of kind of complicated, shady stuff that can go on.
Yeah, and a lot of it's like he said, she said. Like
Yeah.
In the end, I think there's a lot of reasons why this movie failed to find the mainstream audience. But of course, we're talking about it now, so it is a cult movie, and one that I think is still pretty well revered. I think a lot of people will watch this, especially around it happens to be October when we're recording this, so around Halloween time. I think it's just one of those kind of like eerie, kind of more creepy children's movies you can check out. And also, just to wrap things up, just landing on with Walter Murch, because we want to finish with him, because this is the One Hit Wonders series, and as I alluded to previously, this is a very specific use of the term one hit wonder, because obviously Walter Murch has had a very long, legendary career as a sound mixer, editor. But as far as directing films goes, this is it. This is the only film. I believe there was one TV project that he directed after this, but this is the only film, and I do wonder if the failure. Well, I'm sure the failure of it had something to do with the fact that he never attempted to direct another film. I wonder if he was even given the chance, though.
I was gonna say I don't know if it was that he didn't attempt it, or if that he wasn't given them.
I have seen interviews
resources.
with him, more recent interviews, and he seems very proud of this film still. So I'm not sure. I would have to look into that more to see if it was his choice or not. But it's interesting. It's an interesting anomaly that exists. And also, one other quick shout out I wanted to say about actually two. Walter Murch wrote a book called In the Blink of an Eye, and if you're interested in filmmaking. I was going to say filmmaking and editing, but filmmaking in general.
Yeah, particularly editing, though. If you
particularly
have
editing,
an interest in editing.
He wrote this book. It's very short. He added on to it years later, and it's still very short. And I read it in film school. Jeremy, I think you said you read it as well. And I just read it again recently. And there's lots in there to take in, lots of tips and tricks, and just like the way he talks about different films that he worked on. I think it's very interesting to read about that and to have in the back of your head if you're at all interested in film or in making films.
It's kind of amongst editors considered the Bible of film editing. So
much shorter.
If you have any interest in, if you have ever edited anything, you will find a lot of material in there that you understand and have experienced. And if you are hoping to edit or just learning how to edit, you will find a lot of very, very helpful resources to kind of guide you in the darkness in the cutting room.
Or just watch an interview with him. I mean, he's very knowledgeable and he's had a lot of experience in the business, obviously. And I still think of it every time I make a cut. I think of when someone blinks. That is when you make the cut. Usually. Anyway, so and one other thing. So he was also one of the writers of a previous film that we discussed on this show, THX 1138 with George Lucas. So those two were friends, and they wrote that film together. And you can find that in a previous episode we did for the series Lo-Fi Sci-Fi. So THX 1138, that was a fun one to talk about. And I think that about wraps it up for Return to Oz. Anything else you want to add there, Jeremy?
No, just a fun, wacky find. Good unintentional horror movie.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you for listening to Cult Movie Cult. You can find us on iTunes, Podbean, and Spotify. If you'd like to contact us, or if you'd like to be a member of the cult and be on the show, you can reach us at cultmoviecult@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Cult Movie Cult, and we'll see you next time from the other side.